Special thanks to Public Combo for providing me with a review copy. It's Halloween, and while we often go back to our favorite games, books, movies, and songs that get us in that spooky spirit, I want to offer a new experience that's worth checking out, especially today of all days, and that's Public Combo's most recent release, Deadly Night. Deadly Night follows the story of Carol, a woman who's looking for greener pastures after a recent breakup. Susan, a good Samaritan on a night like this, is driving Carol to the nearest motel that's parked across the street from a bus trip away from Heartbreak. Susan drops Carol off at the motel. At first glance it seems normal enough, but the eerie silence and lack of warm bodies makes you feel truly alone, especially after being cheated on by someone you trust. Carol moseys up to the front desk to get a room for the night, and then we're introduced to the manager of the motel, Mr. Shiny. Get it? 'Cause he's bald? Mr. Shiny tries to get Carol to spill her guts, and that quickly turns into sexual harassment.
I care. I'm sure you're great at wiggling that ass, right? Do you like sex from the front, back, or both?
God motherfucking damn!
Carol wants to leave, and frankly, we all do too. But without a place to go, Carol reluctantly buys a room for the night. Once Carol gets into her room, she decides to take a hot shower before going to sleep. The motel room has a little TV that plays an actual movie to turn it on. It's a nice detail, and I found myself watching the movie for a while before continuing on. The film is called War of the Planets, an Italian science fiction film released in 1966. This is a cute little Easter egg, but I wonder if it refers to Papa Combo's next game, Night at the Gates of Hell, which bases itself on Italian horror. Who knows? The game also provides you with an option to censor the explicit content in the game, and I clicked yes because I didn't want to get mollywopped by YouTube, but for some reason when I replayed the game for more footage, it changed from censored to uncensored, and I was like that chopper man. I was like, what the fuck, man? Anyway, when Carol falls asleep, she wakes up to the motel room on fire. She desperately tries to escape the room, and due to the intense pressure from the heat, the window breaks, which allows her to escape. But instead of being outside of the motel, she's staring at a narrow hallway that's also on fire. As she walks down the burning hallway, a baby is sitting on the floor crying. Carol then bolts awake. It was just a dream. No, a nightmare. She explores the motel room a bit and notices something wrong with her mirror. The mirror is actually a door, and inside, there's a video camera with its video cassette tape missing. Mr. Shiny's been recording her while she sleeps. Well, he records everyone while they're asleep. But still, what a creep! Maidenless behavior. Carol storms to the front desk to confront Mr. Shiny. She goes over the counter to the door that accesses the back rooms, but wait, there's a landline to the right. Wouldn't that be crazy if you could just call the police? I mean, landlines are usually down in horror games and movies. Surely.
911, what is your emergency?
I'm at the Highway Motel. The owner is a sicko. I've discovered hidden cameras behind the mirrors in my room. They were recording.
Okay, don't worry. I'll send a patrol car. The area is quite remote and it will take some time to get there, so please be patient.
This action unlocks the 911 chapter of the game, and while we won't catch up with the police for a while, this tells the player to be mindful of their surroundings and to expect the unexpected. Nothing's unimportant and everything can be used to your advantage in one way or another. Carol enters the back room and finds a bunch of tissues and sex tapes. You play the videotape and you see a couple having sex, and then it moves to you taking a shower. I didn't even know there was a camera in the shower, but there is one now. As you watch the tape, Mr. Shiny enters the room and completely loses his shit. Carol mentions that the police are on their way, but Mr. Shiny decides to lock her in the back room with unknown plans for her.
Maybe I'll fuck that sweet, hairy pussy!
God motherfucking damn!
Carol then notices a window to her right, and with the help of a step stool, she's able to get out of this sticky situation. As Carol sprints back to her room to grab her things, She notices a black van parked near the staircase. She assumes this was how Mr. Shiny planned to dispose of her, and that incentivizes her to grab her things and get as far away from here as possible. She barges into her room to grab her bag from the bathroom, but behind the door she witnesses the mutilated corpse of Mr. Shiny. His body pinned to the wall by a rod. Horrified, she grabs her backpack and flies out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the parking lot. Unbeknownst to her, a mysterious figure exits the van and chases her down the street, knocking her out and dragging her body to the van she was afraid of being stuffed in. This ends the Motel chapter, and it was quite a shocking start to a game I didn't know what to expect from. The atmosphere was executed really well as it honed on that feeling of being at the mercy of weird characters in the dead of night, especially at a hotel or motel. Just the idea of being at a parking lot in the dead of night feels true to life, but it also does a good job of mirroring how Carol must feel at the moment. Her relationship ended because she was cheated on, and now she's fleeing away on her own. I'm probably looking too into it, but it felt pretty real for the most part. Mr. Shiny is one of those villains that you genuinely hate, and feels grounded despite the great over-the-top voice acting.
I'm sure you're great at wiggling that ass, right?
He's not some weird demon or super strong serial killer. He's a disgusting creep that exists in the real world, and is someone that thrives in tearing people down and invading their privacy. Point is, I doubt anyone shed tears over Mr. Shiny getting eviscerated. I also enjoyed how the door loading screens are a callback to the classic Resident Evil trilogy on the PlayStation. The story doesn't end here, so let's dive into the next chapter, the house. Hours later, Carol wakes up in a dark basement, and her movement is limited because she's bound by a rope. Thankfully, she's able to wiggle herself out of it, and she grabs the nearest flashlight. Carol explores the basement until she finds stairs leading to the main floor. As she ascends upwards, she hears her kidnapper make an ungodly noise. So she finds the nearest place to hide for a bit. This is when the game introduces the first rule to survive this game. Look for hiding spots and memorize the locations. The main map consists of 3 floors, the basement, the main floor, and the upper floor. While these floors aren't too big to get lost in, it's paramount that you know the nearest hiding place because it can save you from losing progress. Nothing's more fun than mapping the nearest hiding spot while being chased around by a serial killer that piques your headset. But I digress. The house chapter is where you'll be spending the majority of your playthrough, and it changes the game, literally. Instead of exploring an area and taking in the atmosphere, you'll be solving puzzles and learning lore in order to leave this house alive. The dichotomy between life and death is handled interestingly in this game. So for the first third of the game, you have to hunt down an alarm that's meant to be thrown inside a broken door on the upper floor. Once the alarm goes off, you have to hide either the closet or the bed before the killer comes in. He then proceeds to break down the door, and after he leaves, you have to grab a key. You also have to grab a rust remover, which is also located on the upper floor. Then, as you make your way back downstairs, Carol starts to hallucinate. Your surroundings are on fire, and that same baby is now inside of a crib, and we learn that the baby is named Dylan. After the hallucination ends, you're back on the main floor. There's a door to your left that's locked and rusted, so you pour the rust remover on the door and hide for a while until the rust is removed. Then you open the door with the key, and this room acts as your safe room in more ways than one. If you're being chased down by the killer, you can just run into the room and he won't see you. This comes in handy more times than you'll think, but it does not make the hiding areas superfluous because you'll always need them. It makes way more sense to be safe than risk getting damaged or nothing. The safe room also allows you to use the camera to save the game. The catch is that you're only allowed to save the game 3 times, but those 3 times only pertain to this chapter. The ability to save 3 times feels fair because by the time you get it, you're a third of the way done with the chapter. It also acts as a pleasant surprise because prior to unlocking the save room, death took an annoying yet necessary loss. If you died prior to this point, you'll lose all your items, and the key items like the alarm clock will be spawned somewhere else. Death in this game allows you to take notes and plan things better, even after that point, but when you die a billion times and find the safe room, it gives you a moment to breathe. Speaking of breathing, I highly suggest you play this game with headphones. The killer roams between the 3 floors and you're gonna have to stop somewhere and hear his footsteps. Either he's going up the stairs, down the stairs, roaming the hallways, or even an inch away. Headphones are key to your survival alongside memorizing the nearest hiding places. There's a room on the main floor that has a radio that plays music every now and then, and it's meant to fuck you over. When the music plays, you can't hear his steps, so it adds to the risk and reward system. The only problem with this handling of risk and reward is interactivity and sensitivity. There are moments where you have to drop items to carry what you need or to save something for later. But when you're trying to grab them again, they're always in a spot where you can't easily get them, which means you have to place yourself in an uncomfortable spot to grab things. That leaves you open to getting seen by the killer, and in a game where you have to juggle a few things at once, this brings unfair frustration in a game of skill and luck. There are also times when you're trying to discern the item you're trying to get, but it won't register the item you want. This happened when I had to pry open a spot on the main floor to grab the Game Boy, and it was just unnecessarily annoying. In regards to sensitivity, I had a hard time making sharp turns, and when you're being chased down, that can leave you open to getting hurt, killed, or disorientated. But this was solved by nudging the sensitivity bar once, so I suggest doing that before playing the game. I also raised the brightness because I had a hard time seeing. I think in that case it was a me thing, but you can be the judge of that. Anyway, back to the story in progress. A majority of this chapter is doing puzzles, so I can speedrun this by saying Carol uses the rust remover on the basement valve, which allows the fridge to defrost. You grab the frozen knife and place it on the fireplace to defrost. Then you go to the upper floor to cut a piece of cork to use as a stopper in the bathtub so you can fill it with water.
Grab the bucket from the basement. Use this opportunity to go to the safe area and save the game a second time. Then go fill it up in the tub in the upper floor.
Then, you haul back downstairs to the fireplace on the main floor to douse the fire. Keep in mind, the water pours out of the bucket, so you better not be seen by the killer or tank the damage. The game does have health items, but you should try to not get caught, or know your hiding spots. After putting out the fire, you grab the wrench and run back upstairs to use it on the sink. That gives you a coin, and you better haul ass to the safe room because this is when you'll activate the killer for a scripted moment. You run to the fireplace room and remove the batteries. And for the love of God, make sure you have space in your inventory. Go to the safe room and drop them off. Use the crowbar that's located in the safe room to remove planks of wood that are located on the other end of the main floor. There you'll find a Game Boy and a piece of paper. Get back to the safe room quickly, this is another scripted encounter, and combine the batteries with the Game Boy. Drop everything and grab the piece of rope that's located in the safe room and the crowbar. Go to the upper floor and attach the rope near the top of the staircase. Then go to the room where you had to throw the alarm clock and pry open the floor. You'll get a cartridge and another piece of paper. Drop the crowbar and take the cartridge and paper to the safe room. The rope had to be tied around the staircase because it acts as a failsafe to protect you from the killer, but make sure he actually trips on the rope. If he trips, he leaves the van key and you'll need to get it for the good ending. Combine the cartridge with the Game Boy and you should take a bit of time to read the pieces of paper you found. One paper tells you that there's a well in the basement that's locked via a combination lock. If you get 6,000 points in the game, the code will be revealed and you can escape. The other paper is a diary and allows the player to understand the killer more. Apparently the killer's father was a cannibal, but he taught him to hunt people and eat their flesh. While the killer was apprehensive for obvious reasons, over time he was convinced to love his home and his new horrific life. I'll put a pin on this, it comes back later. You play the game, which is a cool tower defense game with some equally cool music. The game soundtrack is great. It has that John Carpenter's 80s synthwave kind of vibe to it. It hits that sweet spot of unnerving and a bop, which is great. I really love the soundtrack. You find out that the combination is 8163. There's no real time limit, so if you want to keep playing the game within the game, you can. I actually did for a while and I got lost in it until I realized, oh yeah, I have to escape. Hopefully by this time the killer tripped on the rope and you managed to get the key. Make sure you have it in your inventory, and if you want to play it safe, use your last save here. Once you're ready, you run into the basement, unlock the well, and with no other options, you leap down the well. The well is connected to a network of tunnels, but the drop you took knocked you out. The killer finds you and drags you through the tunnels to some kind of meat locker. The killer also undresses you and leaves you on a slab that's surrounded by meat, and as you know by now, they're most likely human remains. The chapter ends with another nightmare. Carol's in front of another house and everything's on fire. She finds the spare key and enters the home. Behind the table in front of you, there's another key, and you try to find out which other doors the key belongs to. You hear a baby crying loudly, and the door you end up opening shows her mother on the ground burning to death. She blames you for burning down the house, she blames you for everything going wrong, and she ends it off by calling Carol a bitch. The baby's room is now open, and once you interact with the baby, the chapter ends. The house chapter is by far the best chapter of the game. While I did have my fair share of issues with how certain things were implemented, the chapter did a great job of combining exploration and quick thinking, which overall made me shiver me timbers. I really enjoyed the great sound work that allowed me to discern my surroundings, and even that skill was slapped around by tricking me from time to time. Sometimes I overcalculated, or I was so focused on hearing everything, I ended up scaring myself when I got caught. His screams vibrated my soul from head to toe. The scream jump scares could be seen as cheap, but I think it plays on the player's ability to play the game. You're supposed to use your ears, and the game will fuck with you if you think you're on top of things. The chapter never stopped horrifying me, and I had to stop a couple times because I ended up scaring myself so much I got dizzy. I know it sounds kind of cringe, but I'm being honest here. I like that the game provides variety, and it's not just an Amnesia or Outlast clone where you're constantly running on adrenaline. The game allows you to explore, understand character motives, and the light puzzles are satisfying to pull off. The small amount of lore stuff I'll explain in a bit, but the next chapter is where the shoe drops. Chapter 3, Susan. Before I start talking about Chapter 3, I like to provide a trigger warning for child abuse and SA. If these are things that trigger you, skip to the time code provided on the screen. Most YouTubers will have chapters, but for some reason they don't work for me, so if you want to skip past this discussion on the chapter, skip to this time code. You have been warned. The Susan chapter follows after Susan's drop-off of Carol at the motel. Due to some unforeseen bad luck, Susan's car gets a flat, which forces her to stop at the side of the road. With no other options, she decides to go on a trek for help and follows the path. Susan finds a house, and after looking around for a bit, she hears someone screaming from down the well. Susan, being the MVP of the Deadly Night universe, decides to investigate the cry for help. She removes the log that blocks the well, and uses a ladder to climb down the well. Inside the well, there are a network of tunnels and a locked door. For some reason, the key is attached to a rat, so you have to chase Remy down until you grab the key. When you open the locked door, you see Carol in the same room the killer left her, meaning that Susan somehow stumbled onto the murder house. The game fades to black and the chapter closes by lore dumping to the extreme. The other shoe has dropped and it is loud. We learn that Dylan is Carol's younger brother. He looks like a young kid rather than the baby we've seen him as, but it could be that Carol sees him as her baby brother and her nightmares take that quite literally. I really don't want to explain this beat by beat, so I'll drop the hammer here. Carol's mother used her for sex work while she was a minor. Carol then decides that she's had enough. It's implied that this has been going on for a while, and burns down her home. This is why her nightmares include infernos. She burned down her house, killed her mother, and left her brother in the house. Carol's later seen outside the house when the authorities show up, which leaves the adults suspicious of everything. Dylan survives, but he suffers burns to his face and brain damage due to smoke inhalation. Carol and Dylan are sent to foster care and are adopted by a Mr. Miller. The final shot shows the murder house and reveals that Dylan was a serial killer and he wears the same mask he wears now as an adult. This explains why Carol is plagued by nightmares and hallucinations, especially the one she had at the house. But it does bring into question her reaction to seeing Dylan throughout the game, and even Dylan's motives. For instance, Dylan murders Mr. Shiny. Did he do that for his sister, or as an act of murder? How did Carol not realize it was Dylan, and why doesn't she comment on it past this point? She could have disassociated, or blanked out the experience, which only surfaces in her PTSD-riddled nightmares. Did she leave Dylan to his own devices with Mr. Miller? This entire exposition drop brings to mind an endless amount of questions that never get answered. Now, Poet Combo has been known to release novelizations of certain games that are all written by Regina Watts. I have no idea if there will be a book. I tried asking, but they were busy at the time. It's just weird to put a lot of story here and refuse to give some kind of satisfying ending. The safe room has some kind of sigil, and in the bad ending, Dylan transcends or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of confused. It doesn't ruin the game for me whatsoever, but I wonder if the story was written first, or was the game made first with the story being added later on. Furthermore, the use of dark themes does not feel exploitative or edgy. Everything is implied and nothing is shown or heard, which in a way feels respectful considering the story doesn't really slow down like this again. I'm not in any way an expert on this, and I would love to read your thoughts about their handling of the subject in the comments below. After the lore drop, Susan and Carol trade notes and begin their final escape. If you kept the van key in your inventory, it shows up next to the slab where Carol was left at. Don't forget to grab it. Carol and Susan make their way to the van, but nothing's ever easy. The van refuses to start, and it seems bleak for Carol and Susan until...
Shit, it won't start.
Fuck!
We begin the final chapter of the game, which is called 911 Call. A police officer enters a gas station to see a bunch of gruesome murders. Based on their bodies, Dylan was definitely the perpetrator. The officer grabs the key to the back room to check the surveillance footage, but to his shock, there's no surveillance system. The Deadly Night universe seems to be a place of horrible luck and even worse timing. For some reason, Carol's wallet seems to be left there, possibly by Dylan, and the officer uses the ID to identify the bodies. Obviously, we know Carol's not the murderer or even here at this moment, but the officer seems to wonder if Carol has any relations to these murders. Once again, due to a case of horrible luck, the officer's radio is out of commission, so he drives to the motel that's nearby. The officer rolls up to the motel and tries to enter the main building, but it's locked. He then explores the motel a bit until he enters Carol's room and bears witness to the mutilated body of Mr. Shiny.
What the hell is going on?
Honestly, bearing witness to 3 murders in one night by mistake can make any person rethink their job choices. Fun fact, the cop is played by JJ from the YouTube channel Residents of Evil. They stream the games, cover RE news, and are currently working on a fan film with some of the original cast from their first Resident Evil game. He does a great job, and it was nice to hear his voice in the game. The officer decides to drive further up to see if he can catch up with the serial killer / Carol until he runs into Susan's car that was left on the side of the road. He checks her car and then walks down the same path Susan walked through. You hear something and pull your gun out. Dylan is here and you're definitely next on his list, knowing his luck. This prompts the final boss fight, which was something I didn't expect to happen. I've been running around, exploring, and flailing my arms around like an idiot. Now the game expects me to 360 no-scope a serial killer in the dead of night. It's crazy how unlucky this guy is. He finds a bunch of dead bodies, he can't call for backup, and now he has to fight a muzzled up serial killer. You're gonna have to strain your eyes and ears as you walk in blind. If you see him running at you from afar, be ready to shoot him, and if you can't see him, make sure you watch your back. You have to land 6 shots on him, and this was the most annoying part of the game. The fire rate forces you to be deadly accurate, and by the time I noticed him, it was too late for me. Eventually, I got good, and that was only when I played the game 2 other times, but once he's dead, he's dead. More on that later. The officer meets up with Susan and Carol, and they're taken to the hospital. We saved the city! The bodies found in the underground tunnels are put to rest in proper burials, and Dylan is finally dead. Or is he?
Although authorities claim to have finished with the killer, after arriving at the scene to pick up the body, he had disappeared.
I smell sequel. But that's Deadly Night. There's also a bad ending where Carol and Susan are killed when they're running to the van, and once you kill Dylan, the sky turns red and a giant eye is watching you down, and like, it's really weird and it threw me off guard, but that's how I felt during my entire playthrough. You can access the chapters in the main menu, but if you skip the motel chapter, you'll automatically get the bad endings since you can't call the cops. You can still get the van key though, and there's also a collectible VHS tape in the motel chapter. The game does give reason to go back, and I'm definitely adding this to my Halloween playlist. I really enjoyed Deadly Night. It kept me on my toes from beginning to end, provided some great bad voice acting, and was overall a fun time. There weren't any glitches throughout my playthrough, and it's a consistently tight experience. You can get this game on Steam for $9.99, which means you're getting a gripping horror experience for a great price. I've been a huge fan of Public Combo for around a year or so getting the chance to gush about one of their newer titles has been an honor. Deadly Night gets a 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, consider slapping the like button, and if you want to see more, think about subscribing to the channel. Did you enjoy the game? Did you not? Or what games would you like me to cover next? Drop your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section below. Of course, I'd like to once again thank Public Combo for providing me with a review copy and being patient with me. I genuinely appreciate it. I'd also like to thank my patrons, LeoCrit and RetroRoy, for supporting the channel, and for $1 a month, your name can show up right here. Love you guys and shamalamamoomoo.
What the fuck do you care?
I care. I'm sure you're great at wiggling that ass, right? Do you like sex from the front, back, or both?
God motherfucking damn!